Yeah, let's get started. So today's conversation is going to be about strengthening your network with network security and Peplink. And so we're going to go over kind of some fundamental layers around um, security architecture. And once again, this is not a CI, this is not a security training as much as it is applying security techniques to Peplink. But we're going to go over some of the layers related to Peplink and security, and then how we utilize those capabilities inside of our ecosystem. And that's really where we're kind of hitting on is what tools are available inside Peplink's ecosystem to kind of meet those needs, or sometimes people say to check that box, right? Make sure
Mhm.
we can check the box to the CEO and the CFO and say, hey, we've got this covered. You've got peace of mind and with the infrastructure we have in place.
Absolutely.
So we'll start with easy, kind of a basic idea of kind of like the security layers that we have in place. And this can adapt based on different network topologies, but it's kind of a general overview. We have our client layer, like how we secure the client or the endpoint. And and Peplink is not an endpoint device. And so we think about client security when it comes to Peplink, and it's really about guest isolation, 802.1x, captive portals, things like that that we would have to help the security of the clients. But really a good EDR or something like that that goes on your endpoint is going to be, you don't, this is not in lieu of a really good endpoint uh, a tool. I don't want to go into specific vendors, but a really good endpoint tool would help
Yep.
with that as well. Then we go into the
Yeah.
router layer, and we can talk about how we how we connect those clients to the internet. And so what firewall policies, that's going to be, our layer 7 capabilities and our firewall rules, content blocking, even things like traffic shaping and routing that bring things that send certain types of application over certain networks, to be able to control the flow and the path that's happening. And then we can talk about some other cool stuff, but I don't want to spoil everything in just the first slide. So we'll just keep it with that. And then we talk about the SD-WAN layer. We can talk about how Speed Fusion itself, by the native, like by what it does inherently, adds an incredible level of security to your network, with or without encryption. Even, I mean, just what it does by nature. And then we can talk about the cloud layer, which is going to go right into the in control layer. But the cloud layer is how do we secure our cloud applications like Google or Amazon or Microsoft applications or other ones. But how do we secure that access to those applications? And then the final is administration, and we use in control too. But and so it's how we can use in control too, uh, their centralized management capabilities to ensure policy compliance, firmware, and things like that. And that's really sort of an overview of what we're going to cover today in this webinar.
Yeah, I really like this kind of methodology or this way to break it up, because I think what I see a lot out there is people just get really fixated on one specific security topic, and that becomes their perspective on what security is overall. And there's so much more than any one thing here, and you can't just look at one thing or another. You have to look end to end and really get the full scope of it. And yeah, let's
And
start
I
digging
think,
into the layers.
yeah, and I think right the way you said that, Travis, is exactly right. We got to look at the total picture and the flow of traffic. It's not just what does my firewall do. It's what's my ecosystem, what's my infrastructure, and what are we trying to talk to, and how do I secure all pieces of that to mitigate any sort of um, unwanted threat actors.
Mhm.
So we talk about the client layer, and once again, we are not an endpoint protection. So what we really focus on is how those clients connect to the network. And so things like guest isolation, um, with VLANs, and then the ability to do inter VLAN routing and turn that on and off, our inter VLAN firewall policies, which I'll show you in a little bit, as well as Wi-Fi client isolation, so the ability to actually layer 2 client isolation on our SSIDs. And the idea is if you have a guest that's connected into your guest network, it should have only access to the internet. They shouldn't be talking to anything else but the internet. And so we want to make sure that we can isolate those clients because they're not being monitored by our EDR or some platform. And so when they connect into your guest network, they get on the internet, they can do their internet tasks, but they're not going to talk to other clients, and they're especially not going to get into your corporate infrastructure. And then we have rogue AP detection. So once again, part of wireless and that client protection is making sure that we don't have any rogue APs. And I believe, Travis, you said you had kind of a use case to talk about that, and I'll defer to you because I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's it's a feature that's been out there for a long time, but what we see, or the risk out there that I think is common, is especially in like public Wi-Fi networks, or guest Wi-Fi networks where you've got like a shared password. One attack that we see is people will set up an access point and mimic all of those settings, right? They'll use the same SSID, the same encryption key, again in a shared key kind of environment, and then they can basically intercept any of those clients, right? You could be at a Starbucks, for an example, right? And there's the official Starbucks Wi-Fi, but somebody could come in there and set up their own little Wi-Fi access point and start kind of siphoning off clients and hijacking them and inspecting their traffic, and who knows what they may do, right? But we saw this fairly recently with a customer of ours who has a bus Wi-Fi system. So they've got employee shuttle buses, and so this is a corporate application, right? It's not general public, but we had some user reports of slowness and things like that, and as we dug in, we saw, oh my gosh, there's an access point on this vehicle that is not ours, right? But it's mimicking those same settings. And so we could see that from the rogue AP report that, yeah, there's a Hewlett Packard access point, not a Peplink access point, and it's broadcasting the same exact network settings, and there's no reason that should be on here. And so very much a security risk, right? Somebody's trying for some reason to intercept those clients. And so that's really where that can come into play, is when you've got people kind of these public settings more often than not where they're trying to kind of intercept people. And again, hard to say what their motivations are, but not good regardless.
You would hope that they were just trying to increase the wireless coverage and use a bridge, but either way, they shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, and sometimes it isn't nefarious, right? Like you said, sometimes it is simply somebody trying to do better, but in turn they may have caused a problem, or opened a security hole by doing that.
And finally, we have centralized VLAN management. The idea of, once again, ensuring that those settings that we want to apply can happen centrally, which means less opportunity for mistake. If I have all my inner VLAN routing and my VLAN settings and my layer 2 isolation, I can centrally manage that in our in control. That's going to allow us to make sure that we didn't forget a checkbox at one of our sites or on one of our VLANs. And so it just allows for reduce the attack service, by bringing that centralized for you.
Yeah.
And then
go ahead.
And then we talk about the router layer. And so the router layer, there's a lot here. And when we talk about the router layer, this is when we get to really show off some of the capabilities that maybe people aren't aware of with Peplink. And so it's kind of exciting. For example, Peplink has a robust web blocking content filtering database that's basically given to anybody for free if they're on in control. So if your router is talking to in control, you can download this web content filtering database, and you simply check a box, and you can show off that you can block content. So if I'm going to go over to my demo router here, and I can go to advanced and content blocking, like I can block adware or pornography, or if I have a bigger router, this is a BR2, but if I have a bigger router, I actually have a bigger content database that has viruses, malware, and other topics. And so right there, I have the ability to do content filtering, and then I can just check this box and turn it on. And now I have the ability to have my filtering database updated automatically from in control. Oops, sorry. And then we have scalable firewall and outbound policies. So the ability to have firewall policies have inbound rules, outbound rules, internal rules, service rules, as well as IDS and DOS prevention. And then we combine that with our outbound policies to control the flow of traffic. So not only can we block it with the firewall, we can also change the direction of the traffic. So if I have, especially if I have a distributed network and I have, say America and Europe, I could have an outbound policy that says, hey, send Europe traffic to my European Fusion hub, and then send US traffic to my US Fusion hub, or things like that. So you have regional distribution and outbound policy. It's a very simplistic idea of that. But I can control the flow of my traffic as well as the what's allowed through the firewall. And so, and I'll demonstrate that in a few minutes as well. And then we have our DPI application filtering. So we have our layer 7 or our application level firewall. And you think, wow, I mean, this requires a full subscription for most companies, and we have it built right into our router. So if I go back to my firewall now, right here, I have application blocking and a pretty substantial database of application that we have. So I could block, I don't know, Workday or whatever. I mean, a common one that I block just to throw it on my network is I block BitTorrent. I want to make sure no one's wasting my data plan. And so a lot of times, you can block BitTorrent and other applications, but you can also block Google Drive if you're not allowing that on your network. You also have Apple applications here, games and things like that, Facebook. So you can block unwanted applications. And once again, there's no, outside of in control updates, there's no subscription to this. It's built right into your essential care, your prime care, which is just really, in my opinion, really cool, but it's also incredibly valuable. And on top of that, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think a lot of this stuff, this is these are very much security features, but I think the other thing that I can't help but mention is these are cost management features too, right? When we talk about metered connections, cellular data, these are ways to protect your pocketbook, not only from a security aspect, but yeah, just from, I don't want users chewing up Facebook on my, metered connections. So easy way to control that cost component too, but.
Definitely. So like built right into our router, we have an incredibly robust blocking capabilities with web blockings, firewall, outbound policies, and application filtering. We also have, like I said a few minutes ago, we also have intrusion detection and DOS protection. And it's literally just a checkbox to turn that on, and it's going to look for that rogue traffic. And then what's really cool about Peplink is our security patches. And if you aren't aware of this, and I mean, I think anybody on this webinar should be, but if you're not aware of this, there's no gating for our firmware. If there's a security patch, you don't need to put a serial number. You don't have to have a warranty. You don't have to have prime care. You don't have to have essential care. You can go to peplink.com, click support, go to firmware, download that firmware, get that security patch for your equipment. So as long as it's a supported device, which can last for years and years, as long as we're still releasing firmware for that device, you're going to get that free of charge, with or without a warranty. So you're always going to know you have the latest security patches, regardless of the state of your warranty. And I think that's just really neat that Peplink does that.
I think this is such a big deal. And I think it's really overlooked because so many people look at, they go out and they buy a device, right? And they look at the day one cost of that device and they buy it today and then they use it for 5+ years, right? And how many times are they updating it, right? How many security patches are being applied? You buy a $200 cellular router that's, maybe cheaper than a Peplink BR1 Mini, but I'm guessing 90% of those never, ever get a single firmware update. Maybe they get one, maybe, right? But there's all kinds of new vulnerabilities every day. Like those things are not safe, and that's not a good way to go about it. And so, yeah, not only do we make it easy, but the life cycle that we support and release these patches is just unprecedented. You won't find a vendor out there that's going to support a product and a platform much longer than Peplink. It's really unique from what I've seen in the last 20 years in the industry.
And on that, especially with the cost saving side of it, everything that I just demonstrated, I demonstrated locally on the device, which means those features will last forever. You might not get updates if you don't renew your warranties for the databases, but the functionality, the ability to block that application is perpetual. And so nothing I've shown off yet is in control. And we're going to get some cool in control stuff. But I mean, everything that we've demonstrated is perpetual. The application blocking, content blocking, the security updates, the IDS and DOS, none of that requires any in control other than updating the databases on the device. And and so once again, a router obviously is key for us. Then we talk about the ability to do WAN-to-WAN links using our 256-bit AES encryption. So now you're talking about kind of like getting into speed fusion a little bit, where we can actually split data up. We can use multiple links. We can split the traffic up, which makes it really difficult to attack. If I have 4 links and I'm doing 4 different 256-bit encrypted tunnels or connections to my infrastructure, it's going to be really, really difficult to attack that link, because they're going to have to capture all of that across all 4 links and then hack all 4 encrypted tunnels just to see, and hopefully they got something right. But so we've had some pretty successful analysis of that, but it's incredibly secure. The ability to have 4 independently encrypted tunnels that then work together as one bonded unit or one load balancing unit, depending on how you're doing failover or whatnot, but to work as one unit to increase that security between your sites or to your cloud applications.
Yeah, I think if anybody who's taken some security courses, one of the first things you hear about is a man in the middle attack, right? Somebody kind of sitting in the middle and intercepting traffic. Well, you need a lot of people in the middle in this case with speed fusion, right? Like it becomes just exponentially difficult for that type of attack to even be possible with the way speed fusion breaks traffic up and uses these different paths and different encryption keys. So yeah, this is
not to mention it's exponentially. I mean, it's exponential. If you have it's not really exponential, I guess it's linear, but it sounds cool when it's exponential. It gets increasingly more difficult, because if you have an HD4 with 4 5G modems and you have 1 internet connection at your office, that's going to create 4 tunnels. If you have 2 internet connections at your office, that's going to create 8 tunnels. So if you have 3 connections, that's going to create 12 tunnels. And so it gets increasingly more difficult the more internet connections you have involved in this design. And a lot of companies are picking Peplink because of our multi-WAN capabilities. So a lot of our customers have 2 internet connections, a cable and a DSL, or a fiber and a cable, or 2 fibers, plus their mobile sites where they're maybe running 5G and cable services, or multi 5G and cable, or DSL and fiber. And so when you take all those internet connections and you combine them together, you create an incredibly difficult network to breach on the WAN side. That man in the middle are trying to listen on the pipes.
Yeah, and if you look at any other VPN, right, IPsec, or these software clients, or other like WireGuard, they're a single connection to a single connection with 1 encryption key. It's just not the same. It's not even close to the same, right? This is a whole nother category of difficulty to break and intercept.
And then to make it even more complicated, we do packet-based bonding, packet-based balancing. And so we take this incredibly secure tunnel, and then we distribute these packets across them all. So a lot of times you might think people do load balancing, where the session 1 goes on WAN 1 and session 2 goes on WAN 2. And a lot of our, other products will load balance over multi-WAN and then have tunnels established. We actually break that up. So your session, your Zoom or your file upload or your bank account session is actually being broken up into multiple packets and doing packet level bonding, which just further increases the difficulty for attack in the middle there. So, and then we talk about security on a different level. We talk about the SD-WAN side, and that is really security by keeping your network up and running, helping maintain reliability and resiliency. So when we talk about SD-WAN, we talk about bonding and hot failover and resiliency of your infrastructure. Because if you can't talk to your SIM, you can't get your analysis, your network's down, you have different levels of security you have to worry about. And so when we then add the SD-WAN side of this, with the ability to fail over from MPLS to cable or DSL, or aggregate all of them together, we further increase your uptime and your resiliency, keeping your infrastructure going.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too, because again, security, a lot of the time we talk about people like targeting your information, trying to steal your information. Well, a lot of the times they're not trying to steal anything, right? They're just trying to shut you down and disrupt you. And, that's the denial of service and those kinds of things. So again, like you said, this protects you against that too, because there's so many different ways you can keep moving, even if they attack one provider or another provider. You've got options.
I took security years and years and years ago. But I mean, isn't it CIA, like confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility or availability in the CIA of security?
Oh, it's
And
the acronyms. It's been a while too.
so we talk about the availability of it, making sure that we keep our infrastructure available
Yep.
is one of the pillars of security, fundamentals at least. Um, and then everybody's moving to the cloud, and we talk about, okay, well, now we're in the cloud, and I kind of said this earlier. The cloud layer is merged with our in control platform. So we have administration in the cloud, and we have cloud security. But the one of the things, like if you think about password management, a lot of times people will actually have shared passwords between their devices. Well, within control, you can actually randomly generate passwords for each of your devices, as well as create complex usernames that are pushed down centrally, um, giving you the ability to make sure that your devices can't be compromised by an employee that maybe has a list of a list of those passwords that you never change. So your switches and your APs and your routers, they're local management. You can randomly generate passwords, and anytime you have a change of employees, or you have a change of just, you can do it randomly that you want. You can just randomize and regenerate all those passwords with a checkbox. And so literally, you're managing the access to these devices on your network very well, because now you can randomly change the passwords. No device has the same set of passwords. Um, and then you can establish complex usernames, which is part of PCI DSS anyways, is making sure you don't have just admin as the username. You want to have like Peplink University admin or something like that, not just the word admin or administrator. And
Mhm.
and so and then you don't even need those passwords, because you have in control, which has two-factor authentication and the ability to then log into those devices. And so really, you're generating complex passwords as a way of just getting, you're basically mitigating people on your network from just snooping around and accessing stuff they're not supposed to access.
I love these tools because I think in security, there's this kind of like conventional wisdom of there's security and there's convenience, right? And the more convenient something is, the less secure it is, and the more secure it is, the less convenient it is. And these tools really push that scale back, because these are tools designed to make security convenient, right? You can, like you said, randomize 1,000 different routers passwords like that. And that's convenient and secure. And so we're really giving power back to those administrators so that it is convenient to be secure and not so much of a headache to behave in a proper way to keep yourself protected.
Exactly. And so, the ability just to manage that is, and essentially, and in control, is incredibly powerful, and it's really easy. I mean, let me see here if I could demonstrate that for you, for anybody that's running in control. So if I go into my network, I go to settings, device system management. And so right here, I can have this device web admin, and here I could Peplink University admin, and then I can assign a random password, a shared password, or I can let the device manage that password locally. I hit save, and then it's going to push out that random password. And then once I do that, I can say, reassign a new password. We had an employee change. You be part of your employee transition procedures. We have an employee change, or every 30 days or whatever. You just check reassign a new password, hit save changes, and it's going to generate a new password. If you need to, then you can download a copy of these admin passwords for out-of-band management. The network's offline, you don't have in control, you need to log in locally, you can do that. And then additionally, we can configure how you can access these. I can access these on SSL on the LAN only from a specific VLAN. So if I have a management VLAN or an IT user's VLAN, I can actually say the LAN management of these devices can only happen from a specific VLAN if I want. And you can push that out throughout the infrastructure. And I'll show you the other stuff in a minute, but I mean, incredibly useful. And so we talked about the local router, but now we get to talk about how we can do this in the cloud with in control and our cloud operations. And so we think about the administrative layer of this in the cloud, and we have tenant segmentation. So with our Fusion Hub appliance, you can actually create VRFs and then have complete tenant segregation. So if you're an MSP or an MSSP or something like that, and you want to create a hosted solution for centralized firewall or IP management, in a Fusion Hub, you can actually spin up multiple VRFs, have multiple different customers with conflicting subnets use your Fusion Hub to in your cloud infrastructure, and you can have that distributed, right? You could have like one in East Coast, one in West Coast, one in Europe, etc. And you can point your clients to those the VRFs designated to them, or if you're just a large organization with a lot of business units and you want to keep your broadcast group separate from your research group or some variant thereof, you could do that as well. And then we have, once again, moving that security up into the cloud or the administration layer. We now have comprehensive traffic security. So I showed you on the router how we had the ability to do traffic security. But let's say you have 150 sites and you don't want to log into the router and turn on adware and virus and malware blocking on each and every router. So there's a couple of things that we have that you can do. Once again, in device settings, device system management, we have the ability to turn on all of our logging and centrally manage that and force it on all of our routers. So you can turn on URL logging, session logging, send events to remote syslog server. Then down here, you can turn on NetFlow and capture your V5, V9, and IP fix and send that to your SIM. And so now with 3 checkboxes and a couple IP addresses, all of your sites everywhere in the world are now going to your SIM. And if somebody changes that locally, factory resets the router, it's going to come online, it's going to connect to InControl, and it's going to start doing it again. They can't wipe that setting locally because InControl is going to push that down. So as long as it's in your organization and your management, that setting is being pushed.
Yeah, and if you deploy a new system, it's no big deal, right? You've got 150 routers. Yeah, you just make one change and you've just now migrated, right? It's not that huge effort anymore.
We had a client, actually, that's not really related to policies, but we had a client that had was using SFC Protect, and they kind of outgrew the 200 megabits per second limit, as well as some of the bandwidth capabilities. They wanted to switch to SFC Speed Fusion, going to a Fusion Hub. They wanted that dedicated bandwidth and centralized firewall. And well, I guess it is kind of security related there, centralized firewall of the Fusion Hub. And so literally, we just went to Speed Fusion, click, turn on, set up the Fusion Hub, and literally in about 9 seconds moved 180 some sites from SFC to a dedicated private Fusion Hub, then centrally managed the outbound policy, pushed it to the Fusion Hub instead of Speed Fusion Protect, and we were instantaneously now on this Fusion Hub, and it took maybe 10 minutes max. And so that central management is incredibly powerful.
That's cool.
Yeah. Oh, let me show you the comprehensive security. I started talking about logging and got distracted. So then if you go to network settings and then firewall rules, we can turn on manage firewall rules and create a rule set. And so here I have my outbound firewall rules, my inbound firewall rules, my internal firewall rules, my intrusion detection DOS. So I can make sure that's enforced on all of my set routers, and then my local service. And then if you go to the right here, content blocking, all of your content blocking can now be managed centrally inside InControl with 2.13. So now I have the ability to block Hulu or block BitTorrent and things like that, and have that applied to every router at the exact same time. I no longer have to log in and manage my content, my web blocking individually per router. I can now do this right from the content blocking tab under firewall rules. And so here I can block my adware, my malware. I can block BitTorrent, which is just sort of my default block there. I can tell it to update the database automatically. And in control, I can exempt user groups if I need to, exempt subnets if I need to, customize domains that I want to block if I need to block a particular domain, or exempt domains from web blocking. So if I've got something that's blocked in the database that I don't want blocked, I can add it to the exempted domains list. And all of that now, once you check that box and turn it on, it just goes to all of your routers. And you can say, oh, I don't want to go all my routers. I only go to some of my routers. Not a problem. You can use tagging and apply these firewall rules to a specific tag, like branch versus data center. So I can have a data center firewall policy, a branch firewall policy, a mobile unit policy, a fleet policy, and each of these policies can have different rule sets based on what they need to accomplish or what their mission is.
I think those tags are such a powerful component of this, because it's not just those firewall policies, right? Like you talked about earlier, the VLANs can flow into that same tag, and all sorts of branch specific or mobile specific elements can all be waterfalled with one tag, and then you've got one policy to update. And it's
It's
just,
amazing.
yeah.
And when paired with in control, we now have the ability to do destination based on SAS and region. So you can create inbound and outbound policies based on SAS and region now. And so I can say, allow Microsoft Office, but block every country out other than, we're in the USA, so no president there, but block everything except for the USA. And then, so literally, if Microsoft has a server in the Netherlands or in the UK or somewhere else, if it's part of my Microsoft Office that I'm allowing, I can allow that access, but block everything else. And so we can combine, and now that is unique to In Control. That's not going to be local. Those are databases that are driven by the In Control platform. And so those SAS and the region is an In Control firewall only. So if you log into your router and go, hey, where's region and SAS? Just remember that's built into In Control. But you can make outbound policies and inbound policies based on source, SAS, and region. So you can allow inbound connectivity on port 443 from your country and only your country. So if it's outside of your country, then it's not going to work. And so, because a lot of times right now, especially with least use for permission, the idea is I don't want to allow people just coming in on port. I still see people that use like RDP inbound access, which is sort of probably a security no-no, but they still do it. And so at least you can limit that to your country. Or you can create a grouped network, which is a group of IP addresses, and limit that RDP to a specific group of IP addresses. And so you have SAS, region, and group networks that really allow you to fine tune who's allowed to come into your network or where you're allowed to go out. And then in addition, we have the content blocking and application capabilities. And then security patches. We talked about security patches being easily available for free on peplink.com. But once again, if you have 150 routers, you might want to download that firmware, then log into 150 routers and update them. So now you can go to settings, firmware policy, and you can make sure that all of your routers in your entire organization, or your switches or your APs, it's not just routers, but all of your devices are running the latest and greatest firmware. I can simply just see my router, choose the latest firmware, tell whether I want to do this immediately based on a schedule. Maybe my schedule window is from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. Or if I enter a geofence. So if I have GPS capabilities, I can actually say only update that router like my fleet vehicle when it enters the depot. And so based on your needs, you can push out this firmware to suit that mission. But the idea is now I don't have to I don't have to worry that my routers or my switches or my APs aren't running the latest security patches, or I missed one because I was logging in and updating those locally. Now you can enforce it that my routers and my organization are going to run this particular firmware set. And it might not be the latest firmware. Maybe there's a special firmware or a unique need where you don't want to push the latest firmware. So you can enforce that, hey, my organization is going to standardize on this particular firmware, which is also really nice because then people can't accidentally push the wrong firmware.
Yeah, and I think there's one little thing on this page that I think matches up with what you were just talking about really nicely. That little warning right below the table there, devices not following the policy. So, if you're a large organization, you don't just blindly roll out new firmware, right? That's a rookie mistake if you've got 100 or 1,000 sites. But you might want to start testing it, right? You need to start testing it. And so you can have this global policy, but then you can override that on a unit by unit basis.
Yeah.
So that you can incrementally test those firmwares and get them into production and do that safely. And this tool reminds you like, hey, you've overridden that policy and that's not going to listen to what we're just doing here right now. So you've got that nice.
You could have 100 routers here that do that too. And it'll tell you every single router that's not following the group or the organization policy that's been manually overridden on the local device.
It's really easy for things to fall through the cracks if you don't have little tools like this to, look over your shoulder and just make sure that you've got everything covered.
And then, I mean, no single platform is complete, and we know that. I mean, we know, like I mentioned earlier, like you might have an EDR, you might have a cloud provider, you might be using Zscaler or something else, and so third-party security integrations is key. And I'm going to throw Fluency out there on this because Fluency sponsored the summit last week, and they've done some really cool API stuff with In Control. And so we worked with the security vendors, and we can actually send the net flow, those URLs to third-party security vendors. You can create GRE WAN tunnels that go to Zscaler, and you can outbound policies to send traffic to that Zscaler, and anybody in any other platform as well. But these are just my use cases that I've done recently. And so the idea is we not only have a comprehensive security solution, but if you want to make that even more robust, we support that as well. You can then integrate with your third-party solutions, whether it's going to be DNS proxy, forwarding DNS requests to your third-party DNS provider, whether you want to do the NetFlow and API-driven capabilities with a third-party security appliance, or you want to do port mirroring and send that to your on-prem security appliance, or you want to like go to like a search third-party firewall like Zscaler or something like that. We support all those capabilities, whether it's a GRE or IPsec or even OpenVPN WAN. I do a lot of healthcare, and my healthcare providers have incredibly robust firewalls, and they do not want to rip down an entire corporate firewall system and integrate Peplink SD-WAN. As much as I would love to see them rip out their firewall and replace it, that's not easy to do on an organization, especially if they're doing a POC or you're implementing or trying to work with other platforms. And so Peplink and we've done some really good capabilities where we integrate or work with customer networks. And so a lot of times if someone's new to this, the way I explain it is imagine ordering an MPLS circuit from a provider, and they're going to give you an MPLS switch, and they're going to integrate that into your network. So you're going to have your MPLS switch is going to go out to the internet and connect your branch sites, and then it's going to route into your corporate network. And if you think about the Fusion Hub or our balance router, if you're integrating with an existing network as an MPLS SD-WAN or an MPLS switch over cellular, what you're doing is you can actually take that Peplink router or the Fusion Hub and integrate it with your existing infrastructure and just enable a routing protocol, whether it's a static route, OSPF or BGP, and then advertise that into your network. This allows you to extend your infrastructure with Peplink SD-WAN without replacing your firewall. And you can simply use a default route like 0.0 that goes to your corporate firewall. And now you have the ability to secure your branches with Peplink, but having your existing firewall. And honestly, this is a huge cost savings. We have customers that go, wait a second, I only need to have one firewall. You go, yeah, you'd have one firewall. We do a default route 0.0 to your firewall. And now all of your branch offices are using that one firewall policy. And so we've had some really large hospital systems and some pretty big big enterprises use this capability to extend the infrastructure without replacing their existing firewall or working with their existing firewall. And then I've had other customers use it as a migration strategy. So basically working with the firewall, you set up your branch. It's once you get everything migrated over, then decommissioning and making the Peplink the default gateway and having it your main firewall. And so we've used it for both ways as a migration strategy and as an interoperability strategy. That might be too much for this topic, but if you have more questions about this, please, I'd love to share it with you.
I mean, I think it's good because it speaks, we've got a product range, right? We've got like $200 to $300 products, and we've got like $30,000 products, and those go into very different environments and get used in very different ways. And you need different tool sets, and you're going to be an all-in-one in one use case, and you're going to be, using a third-party solution in another use case. And yeah, this just speaks to the ability to play both of those.
Yep. It just allows for less stress implementations. If your security department's, maybe hesitant, you can say, hey, well, we can play with this without replacing our firewall. And I just think that's neat of Peplink that we built that capability to just interoperate regardless of the platform or the environment. This really belongs on the that client security slide. This actually goes more into client security, but Peplink does support 802.1x, and we support it on our switches and on our Wi-Fi. So whether it's WPA Enterprise or WPA3 Enterprise, or 802.1x on your switch ports. We do support centralized authentication with Radius servers, whether it's the access point or the switch. And then finally, we have hardening techniques that we try to stand by and that we support. And so that in itself is probably an entire course. And the idea is to make sure that in this webinar that you understand that we have this capability and we implement them properly. And so we talk about hardening techniques. IDS, I showed you how to turn that on. The IDS inside either the local firewall or an in control. DOS prevention, once again, that checkbox, IDS and DOS prevention are kind of one and the same. And then firewall hardening, I showed you how to implement firewall policies in control or on the local router to make sure we can block all inbound traffic and outbound traffic. One thing I do want to show about that is we talked about integration in the firewall rules. If you want to go to firewall rules and you create a rule, sometimes the default rule is going to be, could be either allow or deny. So I can say, either allow this traffic or deny it, any. But if I click on this default rule, there's no auditing checkbox. So I can make my default to allow or deny, but there's no way to enable logging here. So a lot of customers, I'm gonna do this on the inbound. So I could say my inbound I want to deny, but that's not going to log inbound attempts. So I can create a new rule and I can say inbound deny logging. And then I can make the same rule, any, deny, event logging, enable. Now I have this rule that's going to enable event logging and still deny all traffic. This is going to create those events in my firewall log that then gets dumped up to my SIM. And so if I am running third party and I need to see those event logs for the deny traffic or the allow traffic, however you want to do it, you can do that right there. And so if you want that logging, and then every additional rule, like for example, if I did an outbound, I don't want to do that. If I did an outbound rule, and I could say allow, my country, and I could say destination, region, my country, allow, enable event logging. So I can enable the service that allows me to allow that traffic out, but I'm still going to log the traffic. I want to see where I'm going, what services and ports are being used. And then I can create that default deny. I could say then deny other countries or deny all. And I click that deny and then event logging. So I'm allowing access to my country and then I'm blocking everything else, but I'm logging those attempts so I can see what's happening. And so it just allows you to get that fine tuning of centralized management, but also the event logging that allows you to dump that to your platform. And then I showed you DPI in layer 7. I showed you how to use application blocking. And so the idea of being able to block BitTorrent or Facebook or other applications you might not want, and being able to centrally push that. I showed you SaaS, the ability to choose SaaS as either a source or a destination in our firewall and outbound policies. And then what I didn't show you, which is really cool, is we have a very robust API. And if you have programmers, if you go to an internet browser here, and we go to Peplink in control API, just Google that. Oop. Sorry. You'll get this in control 2 API documentation, and you can click on that and actually read all the in control APIs. But we had a security vendor take our NetFlow and our URL logging and our session logging, dump that through their platform, and then create API responses that automatically added firewall rules to block malicious traffic. So you can actually block malicious actors in real time with the Peplink in control API and a supported SIM. And that is really, really cool. And we have an in control API, and then we have a balance API. So once again, if you don't want to use in control and you just want to do it yourself, boom, Peplink router API documentation right there. You can download the API, and you can build it right into your router and bypass in control. And I think it's weird, but I also think it's really cool that Peplink allows for that, to be able to just be independent of the cloud or connected to the cloud. And then, especially if you're in the retail market or the PC, you're doing credit card transactions, PCI DSS is incredibly important. We have a PCI DSS guide. Once again, you can just Google Peplink PCI DSS. We have a work guide, but we support that hardening built right into our stuff. So make sure you have VLAN isolation. Make sure you have firewall blocking that blocks your point of sale system from only access its required authentication. Authenticators, whoever's doing your credit card processing. And then isolating that on the network. And so we are fully compliant or supportive of PCI DSS as well as other security protocols as well. But you can harden our firewalls down. So we start out open. That supports our small businesses and our small user base. But if you're a retail or an enterprise and you go, man, I want to lock this thing down, we definitely support that, and you can do it very easily in just a few checkboxes, especially if you're using control. I showed you content blocking already. I kind of skipped ahead on a few of those. I got excited, but we have content blocking. And once again, application and category-based blocking. Our firewall rules, inbound, outbound, and so outbound is anything from a LAN, VLAN, VPN user out of WAN interface or SpeedFusion tunnel. Nope, outside of WAN interface. Inbound is from a WAN interface into a LAN, VPN, or VLAN. Internal is LAN, VLAN to SpeedFusion or other VLANs and LANs. That's going to be your internal traffic. And then you have your IDS and DOS, and then you have your local services. Local services are things like SpeedFusion handshakes. So if you want to secure what's allowed to talk to negotiate a SpeedFusion tunnel handshake, that's going to be your local service firewall rules, as well as your DNS server and other things like that. So in our Wi-Fi network, we have actually the ability to kick off users that are you don't want to have. So in our router, you can actually check, you can actually see in your client list and click them off. But we also have the ability to automate and block traffic. And so this is an example of using in control to block traffic access to malicious sites using our content filtering. And then once again, we have DHCP snooping in our switches. So you can actually, if you don't know what DHCP snooping is, basically create trusted and untrusted ports. So a common use of it, attack, or even just kind of people messing up, is they'll plug like they'll go to Best Buy thinking they're improving their Wi-Fi coverage. We talk about rogue APs. Well, they'll buy like a Linksys router, they'll plug it into the network, and boom, they broadcast DHCP on your network. And so Peplink switches have DHCP snooping, and so you can actually take the Peplink switch, make your default ports untrusted, which means it'll allow you to request a DHCP but not respond to a DHCP request on an untrusted port. And then your trusted ports are the uplinks to your DHCP server, whether that's the Peplink router, your Active Directory server, wherever you're handing off DHCP, you basically create a trusted path from your switches to your DHCP server. If somebody plugs in an unauthorized DHCP server on your network, it won't be able to respond to requests. So it can receive the request, but it won't be able to respond to those requests. Securing our guest SSIDs, we talked about SSID security. There's a checkbox that you can actually block all private IPs. And so if you're connecting to our SSIDs, whether it's like a BR2 Pro 5G or APs, when you're creating your SSID, you have this guest protect feature. And so you can block all private IPs, or you can create custom subnets or block exceptions. So if you have you want to block all private IPs except a printer, and you want to allow them to print to a printer, but not access anything else, you can actually put the printer's IP address there in the block exception, and it'll be allowed to print. And then you can see down below at the very bottom of that, there's block PEP VPN. This ensures that if you've accidentally broadcast OSPF over your guest network, you can make sure those guest networks can't talk to your remote sites. And then we also have the captive portal with authentication like Radius. And so you can set up captive portals with Radius authentication as well. Oh, and I've already done the demos. I did that during it. So I got ahead of myself a little bit, guys. I apologize. I get super excited. I was trying to we're coming near the end of the hour, so I wanted to get through those last bit of slides. But we do have some time for a few questions if we have some. Have you been answering those, Travis, already, or?
I haven't. There's only a couple here. I love the
Oh yeah,
first
there
one.
are. Let's see. Client guest network access to. Well, I just said that. So someone asked how to give a guest network access to a local printer. You could do. You could either, if you don't block them on the LAN, then they'll have access to a printer. But you could do block exceptions. Now, if you want them to access a printer on your corporate network, say you have the guest network and a corporate network, and you want them to access, then what you have to do is allow inter-VLAN routing. So don't block inter-VLAN routing, and then use the internal firewall rules. So basically, say my guest network can access this particular printer or this group network of printers, and then block everything else. So my guest network IP address subnet allow grouped of printers, and then my guest network deny everything, any, on the internal firewall rules. This will allow your guest network to talk to printers that are maybe in your corporate network, but not able to talk to anything else. But in order to do that, you have to allow the inter-VLAN routing, and you have to allow, you have to at least have a block exception for those printers on the SSID. Somebody asked a question about content blocking. I would open a ticket with your partner, and or if you need help, just reach out to us. That's more of a tech support issue than a how-to. Someone asked if we have white papers on existing firewalls. I've created some documentation on my LinkedIn profile. I think we have a white paper on that somewhere online. But if you want, we do have that kind of a guide. If you reach out to Travis or myself, we can send you kind of our guide on integrating with existing firewalls. So if you want to block users from accessing a particular SSID, that's going to be actually in your access control list for the SSID. So let me go to my in control. So someone asked how to block particular users from accessing a specific SSID. So when you're creating your SSIDs, down here, you have MAC filtering, none, deny all except the listed, allow all except the listed, or radius MAC authentication. So I can say on my MAC filter, I could say deny all except, and then I can have an access control list in control, or I can list the MAC addresses right here. So I could make an access control list under network settings, access control list, list all my laptop, my devices, and then just choose that access control list right here, which can also be applied to firewall rules and outbound policy. So it's better to do that in there. Or I can list the MAC addresses here. Or we can say radius MAC authentication and put in a radius server. So if you want to restrict which users can talk. Another thing that's really cool about SSIDs and security, which I thought was a really neat thing that someone did one time, is our captive portal. If you create a VLAN, like a office VLAN, and you want to restrict to office users, and you don't want to set up 802.1x, so kind of like the non 802.1x method, you can create a new captive portal. Then you can make it email authenticated. Then right down here, you could say domain. So I could say only allow domains, Peplink, unit, I'll just say peplink.com. So we go peplink.com. So now you have a captive portal. This is applied to your VLAN. Someone plugs into your network, they're going to get a captive portal. They're going to have to put in a peplink.com email address. If they don't have a peplink.com email address and get that token, they can't connect to your network. Think of this as a poor man's guide to 802.1x. You could basically secure your network to anybody that has access to email. So it's kind of, I've had users use this as two-factor authentication. I've had users use this as a way of doing security without needing a radius server. But basically, you could have your VLAN, set a captive portal on it, say company name, access. They put in their email address, peter@peplink.com. Well, I'll say Travis because I don't have a peplink.com, but Travis@peplink.com. He then would then get a token in his email, type that in, and then be able to log into the network. But without that typing that in, he wouldn't have access to that VLAN. So you can use this type of methodology as well to restrict users on your Wi-Fi or your SSID to only your domain. So kind of a cool feature that was implemented, and it's actually really easy way to implement just a basic level of security on your Wi-Fi or a VLAN. And our questions just bombarded. I don't know if we're gonna have time to go through all these, so let me see here. Someone asked if a user with a VPN can bypass firewall rules. Actually, you can create a firewall rule to block VPNs, and so then they wouldn't be able to bypass it. I mean, it's pretty easy to block VPNs, especially on the application layer side. But that's where like DNS security, so like making sure you have DNS proxy, you have firewall rules that block the DNS servers or the VPN users. But yes, if you allow VPN, then they could bypass those firewalls. But then once they do that, then they'll have a hard time accessing your corporate network as well. So a couple of things people asking, well, wouldn't it be better for? I'm giving general ideas of the technologies. So it's not best, this is not a best practices conversation. This is a showing you the tool. So whatever you see fit in your design, definitely that's what you should implement. So this is not a best practices webinar. So that's just going to be a general answer to about 7 or 8 of those emails, questions. So someone asked a really good question. Do we offer software for VPN? Yes, we do. We have OpenVPN and L2TP VPN as a remote user. So in our routers, if you go to the advanced tab, remote user access, and turn this on, you can actually allow non-Peplink VPN, so not SpeedFusion. So you have L2TP VPN and OpenVPN support. And then you can create user accounts here. And some routers support Radius and Active Directory as well. But basic routers will have OpenVPN with local user accounts, and then others will have Radius. And then you have your L2TP VPN, and once again, my BR2 has just local accounts, but bigger routers will have Radius and Active Directory authentication. So if you are using SpeedFusion Connect, you do need an outbound policy. We actually have an outbound policy webinar where we talked about SpeedFusion Connect and outbound policies. So if you go back a couple months of webinars under Peplink University or Peplink's YouTube channel, you can actually look up that outbound policy webinar. Somebody asked a question about GPS. Yes, you can. We have a GPS webinar that we did, I think 2 months ago, where we did the GPS fleet management. So once again, youtube.com, and then go to Peplinks, or if you search Peplink University, I've consolidated all these videos into one Peplink University playlist, and you can watch the GPS demonstration. And if you have questions, just let us know. Yeah. Sorry. To reach Travis or myself, you can email travis@peplink.com or peter@westnetworks.com. You should give me a Peplink address. But Travis@peplink.com or peter@westnetworks.com. And we can send you any documentation as well as reference materials if you need it.
You had one once, Peter. I don't know where that went.
I had evangelist@peplink.com, yes. But I don't know if that works or not. I'm not exactly sure. Someone could email that and see if it works. But I used to have evangelist@peplink.com.
I remember that.
The USA connections, then that is the outbound policy. Someone asked if they need an outbound policy. But either way, if you're creating a tunnel, you need outbound policies. So, but we have exhausted all time. I just want to thank everybody so much, and have a great day. All right. So thank you.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you, folks. Thank you again, Peter. 1 year.